Hello everyone, my name is Adam Michael Anthony Simpson and you're watching my YouTube channel Adam M.A. Simpson. This is part 2 of my interview with Dorothy Tovar where she speaks about her research.
So I'm going to move into the other aspect of this interview, which is how your research impacts society. Now, as we said earlier, your research is very relevant to the time, your research on antiviral immune responses in bats. Please explain your research on how it impacts society. Why is it important to the everyday person?
Yeah, answering this question has become a lot easier in the last 8 months.
Wow.
So, when I first started, for the longest time, I would say like, "Oh, I'm a microbiologist and I study bats," and people would be like, "But why? Like, where's that connection?"
Yeah.
So yeah, bats, as we're learning a lot more about now, are a really huge source of really nasty viruses that, get into people and make us really sick. And some examples of those are SARS and Nipah viruses that have caused pretty bad outbreaks in the Eastern Hemisphere. And now another example that we believe comes from bats is COVID. And we don't really understand a whole lot about how bats interact with these viruses, why they seem to be a central reservoir or source for so many of them, and also kind of the drivers of what's pushing these viruses into human populations. So we are learning a lot more, I would say, like within the last 10, 20 years, even prior to COVID. So there's a whole body of work that is being done around bats and how bats interact with viral pathogens. But specifically, my research focuses on a very, very specific immune response pathway in bats that's also actually conserved in humans. So humans have the same immune response pathway as well. And we're trying to understand differences between how this immune pathway functions in bats compared to humans. And we want to use this information to just be able to inform us on, how bats are able to tolerate these diseases. And I think in the long run, ultimately, all of this body of work is going to help us, predict, respond to, and hopefully even prevent disease outbreaks like this from spilling over from bats into people.
Wow. I love that. And I like that you went into explaining that as scientists, we contribute these little, in increments, these small but impactful, findings that will generate a revolution in the future. So
right, but I always struggle with answering. I don't know if you feel this way when someone asks you like, why is your work important, and you the answer that like people kind of want to hear. That's just like, I'm gonna cure the common cold, right? But like really you found a very specific receptor or something that you're going to target, and the cure might not come out for another 20 years or something, right? And there's just so much work that goes into biological sciences in particular, and trying to connect the really seemingly small specific thing that you're studying to an impact that people are gonna see and can relate to can sometimes be really hard, trying to be both scientifically accurate but also explaining it in a way that people care about as well.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean it is difficult. I've had people tell me I don't see why your research is important. That doesn't mean anything to me. I'm like, wow. But I just realized that it's not my fault. It could be, maybe as scientists we need to expand our reach, but I also think we need to focus on this in education as well, and explaining the scientific method from like a young age, so that people understand that it's really hard work, and these small incremental steps take a lot of work. So
right. Yeah. I think I agree. It's like a two-edged sword.
Yeah.
Like on one end, like us as scientists could always do a better job of like communicating and getting the public engaged in what we do.
Yeah.
And on the other end, like I wish that there was a better like baseline understanding of like what scientists actually do. Like what goes into coming up with a vaccine. Like why don't we have a vaccine by now?
Exactly.
Like no, we should all not want a vaccine right now.
Exactly. That's just
that it's vetted. Yeah, you want to make sure that it's vetted. You want to make sure that the scientists that are working so hard to develop these, you know, have the time to comb through the data and make sure, like, oh, if you have this like mutation that's present in like 10% of the population, you're gonna die if you get it. That's obviously like a huge extrapolation, right?
Yeah.
But you want to make sure that like what you're injecting into people is safe, and that takes time. And a lot of science just takes a lot of time, and I feel like it is kind of hard to get people to understand that part of it.
I agree, completely agreed. And so going into the next question, what is your ultimate goal and future research plan post the PhD?
Yeah, that's a great question. Stress, immediate stress.
Oh gosh.
Immediate stress. Yeah, so I'm still exploring a few different options. I think what I've really enjoyed about being at Stanford is just how many opportunities there are to explore different career paths.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've done internships where I've been able to get more experience in science policy, in academia, even in venture capital, right? So like, just like this huge range of things that you can do with a PhD is really kind of been impressed on me. And so now I feel like I'm kind of I feel like caged in trying to like pull the trigger and say like I'm doing this, you know.
Explore your options.
Exactly. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what would be the best fit for me, and then also like where the opportunities come as well. So I don't know, basically.
And you know what, knowing you, I trust you're gonna make the best decision, and I'm just gonna see you, I don't know, with some award in the future. And
Thank you. Includes that on CV.
yeah, or you know, like Shark Tank Biosciences. That would be cool.
I wish that would be. Yeah, I kind of wish. Part of me wishes that my research was more like amenable to like a startup, so that I could like, you know, spin something out of my PhD and like be a entrepreneur in that way. But that doesn't seem very likely. And
I mean, you know what? Spin it any way you can. I think you have it down. But you know what? Anyways. All right. So I'm going into the last question, and this question is actually the favorite question of each interview that I do. If you could dispel any misconceptions about graduate school and getting your PhD, what would it be?
Yeah, I think for me, and this is something that I still struggle with, is kind of like dissembling the like myth of what success is supposed to look like. And by that, I mean, before I applied to grad school, I believed that like, in order to get into Stanford for a PhD program, you need like a 4.0 GPA, like you need to have all this stuff. And I stressed myself out so much, like an insane amount, just like trying to perform and produce in this way that sometimes wasn't super healthy. And I, you know, when I applied to Stanford, I didn't have a 4.0 GPA. It was still a good GPA, and I wasn't like valedictorian of my class. And I, didn't have cum laude. Like, I was like, oh, there's like no way I'm gonna get it, right? And I'm glad that I still pushed myself and applied anyway, because I did. And I think that experience started to dispel myths like that for me. And I just see so many people discouraging themselves. I have a younger sister and she's applying to colleges now. And so like talking to her about like colleges that she should apply to, and she's like, no, on their website it says, their average GPA is 4.8. And I'm like, like, just apply.
Just apply.
Like, yeah, just apply. Especially if you have like other things to show for how you show up in the world, how you think about the world, how you engage with other people. Like, these things are so, so important. And honestly, in my opinion, tell you more about how successful someone will be as a graduate student than whatever their raw GPA was. And so just thinking about like what your story is, what is important to you, where you want to see yourself in the future, and using that to motivate the activities you do, the classes you take. I feel like coming at it from that point, and not just the point of like, okay, well, I want to go to med school, so I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and just having it be this kind of like impersonal checklist of things that you just now going to measure up to some other random person, like that doesn't distinguish you. And I think it makes it hard for people who are reviewing your applications to be like, okay, well, like, what are you about? Like, great, you have a 4.0 GPA, great, you have all this stuff, but like, what are you passionate about? And you really want that to come through in your application. And sometimes like the standard of success doesn't really communicate all of the other really beautiful, intricate things about who you are and what you can contribute to a program or a company or, anything like that.
It's more about a measure of how you thrive in your environment than the raw academic or things that we typically think that we're measuring people.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's not to say like blow off your classes.
Oh,
like,
no.
Whatever, like
do good in your classes, but
please go to your classes.
Yes. But be realistic.
Exams, right? And if you do get a 4.0, that's dope.
Awesome.
Like, yes, like if that is within your capacity, you should totally do it. But if it's not and you don't have a 4.0, it is not like
the end of the world.
Condemning factor that I feel like a lot of us get convinced that it is.
That resonates with me because I was same as you in undergrad. Very fair motivated.
That's a good way to put it.
Yes.
But I would get like an 87 and like cry. Like,
oh gosh.
In tears. Like,
I had a breakdown one time. At the front of the class. That was in retrospect it was funny, but like really. But you know what? I'm glad that you said that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Awesome.
I'm saying it to myself as well. So. Give myself like, it's okay if you don't have a nature paper. Like, it'll be fine.
It will be fine.
It will be fine.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Completely agreed. So that brings us to the end. Dorothy, I highly enjoyed this interview. I think you really will really inspire people by being in this interview and agreeing to share this time. So
thanks for having me.
All right, I'm going to end it now. Thank you again. All righty. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching the completion of this interview with Dorothy Tovar. I thoroughly enjoyed doing this shoot, and I hope you enjoyed watching this episode. Stay tuned for next week. Please like and subscribe. Please, please, please. It helps to encourage me to produce this content. And yeah, hope to see you next week.